So for today's D&D tip, I want to talk about tracking information about the characters. Step 1 of the 8 steps of Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master is review the characters. It's the very first thing we do. And there's a reason why this is the very first thing we do when we're prepping our game, if you're following the steps from Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. And that's because nothing matters more. No NPCs matter. The story doesn't matter. Nothing matters as much to the players as their characters. And the more we have those characters in our mind while we're doing our prep, the more our prep is going to focus down on the kinds of things that are going to matter to the characters. I fail at this often. I wrote the book on it. I preach it constantly, and I'm actually pretty bad about this. Not like an hour ago, before this show, I was doing my prep for my Shadow Dark game, and I think people can remind me of this that are on here on Twitch. I'm pretty sure I reviewed the characters last. I didn't even remember all the characters because it's Shadow Dark and they die. And so I wasn't paying a lot of attention to them. But I did the review of the characters as the last step. And I don't think that's great. Like, I did that because it was like easier for me to still dive into all of the rest of the prep than it was for me to focus on the characters. That's one, unlike some of the other things where like I'm learning about my own process and it sort of changes my relationship with the 8 steps. And in good ways, I don't think that's a good one. I still firmly believe we should be paying attention to the characters. And it can bite you if you don't. And it did for me this past Wednesday. This past Wednesday, I ran a game. We had 4 of us. We were having a good time. Everything was going fine. We had the treasure come up and one of the characters got a piece of treasure. And one of the other players remarked, he's like, that character is brand new and already got a new fancy magic item. And I've been here for like 3 months and I got nothing. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, everything has been a melee weapon. I'm a ranged attacker. I got nothing. I've got no cool magic items whatsoever. And one of the other players is like, you can have this rapier that casts like a crazy glass shard attack. And he's like, fine, I'll take the rapier that does the glass shard attack. So he got a hand-me-down from one of the other characters. And the reality is I just hadn't been paying attention, right? So I roll loot randomly and I pick out loot. And a lot of it has been melee weapons because you're a lot more likely in my random table to roll a melee weapon than you are to roll a ranged weapon. So he just didn't get one. Now, he's also like by far doing, I think, twice the damage of anybody else in the game. So I'm not too worried about the fact that he doesn't have a magic item, but he should have some kind of fun magic item, even if it's not like a fancy bow that makes his, now he's doing even 2.3 times more damage. He could get something else. He could get like a special suit of armor that lets him cast Misty Step. I bet he'd love that. So he can zip around the battlefield and do stuff like skirmisher-y kind of things. Boots of Speed. There's all those kinds of like cool Baldur's Gate 3 sort of magic items. I should have been paying better attention to this, right? I should have looked and said, oh man, I don't think that character has gotten a magic item in a while or ever, right? During this entire campaign. Maybe I should do that. So we're going to talk about this problem today because what are the things we should be paying attention to when we review the characters? First, do it. When you're sitting down to do your notes, even if you're bored, you're at work, you're stuck in a meeting, think about your characters. Write down their names and just think about where they are currently in the session. Think about what's going on with them. Write some of this stuff down. This is something you can do anywhere. You can do it while you're taking a walk. You can do it while you're stuck in traffic. You can do it while you're at a doctor's office waiting for an appointment. You can do it at any point where you just have some imagination time. Sit down, think of the list of your characters, walk through them, remember their names, see if you can remember their names, put those names in your mind, and then ask yourself some of these other questions about reviewing the characters. We don't have to just do it during our prep. We can do it anytime we want. But if you find your mind wandering to your game, you could do worse by having your mind, by kind of moving your minds wandering to the characters, who they are, what they want, what they have, what they like to do. What are the specific things that we can be paying attention to when we look at our characters? So a key is what's important to the players is what should be important to us. The characters are the player's interface to the game. That is their way of interacting with the game is through their characters. So the things that matter to their characters are the kinds of things we should be paying attention to. If a player is telling you, hey, I have this NPC that I'm connected to, and I think it would be really fun to have more time with that NPC, or they just mention it a lot. They say, oh yeah, no, I live upstairs in the apothecary place. Write that down. Write it down. Ask them, oh, who runs the apothecary place? What's your relationship with them? Write that down too. Take some notes about this stuff, right? I think however you manage your notes for your game, have a section about the characters and have each of the characters there and just jot down notes. They can be disorganized. They don't have to be big, and you don't have to paste in 3 pages worth of stuff. A little couple of lines will do. In your notes, take Take notes of the kinds of things that are important to the players. When they mention it to you, write it down. Put that stuff down. And remember, what's important to the players is what should be important to you. What are they paying attention to when it comes to their characters? Now, there are other things that they may not be paying attention to that you might want to jot down as well. We're going to talk about some of these. So what are the basics of the things that you should jot down? Obviously, having a list of what their species is, what's their ancestry, what's their background, what's some information about the character, where did they come from, what are just a little bit of the history. You don't need much. 3 or 4 words will do it. You don't really need a giant paragraph. If they give you a huge amount of backstory, summarize that backstory. Just jot it down into some of who are the names of the people that they were involved with and what was the relationship of those names. You don't need a ton of backstory, and you don't need to record a ton of backstory for it. There's some little mechanically bits that it can be handy to keep track of, like their passive scores. What skills did they bother to be proficient in? This is one I don't think we pay a lot of attention to, but when a player makes a decision to have proficiency in certain things and certain skills and stuff like that, write those proficiencies down, because that's the kind of thing they want to see more of. So then when you're going through your notes, and ideally if you can keep it in front of you during the game, you can recall, oh yeah, they trained in Arcana. Well, I'm going to throw more Arcana stuff. Or they're trained in animal handling. Let me give them a chance to do something with animal handling. They're telling you what they're interested in when they choose things like what skills they're proficient in. So jot that stuff down. Background hooks. What are some of the hooks from their background story that you think you might be able to do something with in the future? What are some of the things you think you might be able to drive into the rest of the game? One of my favorite tricks is when I'm sitting down to do secrets and clues is I will try to generate one secret for every character. What is one thing that a particular character might learn that's about their backstory or about their heritage or about something about that character? What is a secret that I can include where I don't have to identify how they discover it, but I know it's about them? That's a really easy way to, if you're having trouble coming up with the 10 secrets and clues, make 4 to 6 of them about the players, about the characters and what they've got going on. That's something I really like. Then more mechanic-y bits. What are some of the class features they picked up when they leveled up? What are some of the things that they picked up when they leveled up? What are some of the spells they took? One of the things I really like to do, this is something I've only started doing recently, but I really think it's beneficial, is when the characters level up, I mark it in my notes that during the session, we're going to talk about what they got. So again, my Wednesday group just leveled up to 5th level. And this is a level up advanced 5e game. And a level up advanced 5e game, you get a ton of stuff at 5th level. So it's worth the time. It could take a half hour for all of us to go through and talk about what the characters gained. And I'm going to be writing that stuff down. I want to know what they got because I want to use those as potential hooks and interesting things that we can drive into the game. So they made choices. Again, they pick things for their characters. So why don't we take that opportunity to write down the stuff that they picked for their character so that we know that we can use that when we're thinking about our game. So class features are a big one, and leveling up, spells, new abilities, new feats, new features. Sometimes they'll just be like, oh, all I really did, I took a dexterity bump and I got some extra hit points. Like, okay, write it down anyway, right? They got their dex went up. So you could say oh yeah, before you don't think you'd have made that grab, but because you increased your dexterity, you were able to grab the thing before it fell off a cliff, right? Stuff like that. Lightning rods. Lightning rods are a thing that I really kind of, I'm sure it's not unique to me. But my kind of labeling and sort of focusing on this idea is something that I came up with in the last couple of years. We talked about it in Forge of Foes. I don't remember if I described it in Lazy DM's Companion or not. The idea of lightning rods is instead of trying to build monsters that are resistant to the powerful effects of the characters, you instead include monsters specifically designed to be affected by that stuff. The example is the 20 orcs that are running in a perfect 20-foot diameter fighting circle. And you're like, is that so I can fireball them? Like, yes, right? This is so you can, or 20-foot radius, right? There's a 40-foot diameter, 20-foot radius circle of orcs charging in at you. Oh, fireball. Yeah, right? Like set up monsters to be fireballed. Take opportunity attacks. Put in huge monsters with terrible charisma saves that do tons of damage if they don't control them with something like banishment or polymorph, right? Have them put in ways so that the characters who want an opportunity to do some battlefield control have that opportunity. Right, there's a Snack Daniels in a Twitch chat says, shoot your monks, right? Whenever you've got a bunch of archers and a monk, make sure to shoot arrows at that monk. Because they love to see those abilities, right? Try to find ways, now that you know what the mechanical abilities are of the characters, put things in the battles and write them down. So here's that trick when we're talking about that focus on the characters is you don't have to just do it during the prep of another part of the game. You can write it down. You say, oh, this character's got polymorph. And in your notes say, add big brutes with terrible charisma scores, or add lots of minions to be destroyed, or add undead to be smote. Like, you can write down the kinds of encounters that those characters are going to be really good at, or what to avoid. One of my players has a lot of stuff with poison. There's a lot of stuff with poison in Level Up Advanced 5e. And he can be mad, right? When it's like, oh, we fight undead all the time, and undead are always immune to poison. So maybe make sure you put some other creatures in there that are not immune to poison so that he can use his poison abilities, right? What are the things that you can include or avoid so that people don't, their ability is completely negated? So lightning rods is a really powerful feature to make your players happier and still make the game more fun and exciting, because sometimes they might not get control over this. An example of a lightning rod, I've definitely used lightning rods in lots of circumstances, but one of the ones that comes to me is when the characters were fighting the Frost Maiden, Oral the Frost Maiden, in the Adventure Rime of the Frost Maiden. My players were facing one of the iterations of the Frost Maiden herself, and she has legendary resistances and everything else. And we had players who had spells like Banish, and I had her rock attack them. A rock is a really good example. ROC, this is the giant eagle that eats people. Rocks have like 280 hit points. They're really powerful. When they hit you, they do like 60 damage. They do crazy amounts of damage when they hit you. You really do not want to be hit by a rock. Their attack bonus is really high. They could grab you and throw you. They can do all kinds of terrible things. They also have terrible charisma saves, which means they're a great monster to banish and control. And I remember in that battle, it was like they knew it. They're like, we've got to banish it. And then they cast it, and it would make it saving throw. Like, oh my God, we got to try again. Like, we can't let that thing eat us. We will wipe out if we don't control that thing. So it's almost like a little puzzle, right? They've got this element to the battle that they better, not only is there a monster in there that is designed for them to control? If they don't control it, the battle's going to be a lot harder, is an interesting part of how this whole thing works. Maybe you hit it with a hypnotic pattern instead of a banish. Anything we can do to try to stop that thing from hitting us, because we really need to, because if it hits us, we're going to go down. That is something else. And of course, as I kind of started this whole segment, write down their magic items. When the characters pick up magic items, write them down on the list. And that way you can look and say, who didn't get one? I wish I had done this. I do not want my players to be sad that they didn't get a magic item, or mad that they didn't get a magic item when everybody else did. When my wife went through the list of everybody they had, she goes, wow, one player has like 4 magic items and one has almost none, right? And it's because I haven't been paying attention to it. I hadn't been marking it down. I haven't been looking at it. I hadn't, this is an experience that I am sharing. This is not preaching. I failed at this, and I wish I hadn't, because it would have been a lot cooler if that player was like super excited to use a magic item that they picked up a couple sessions ago than they were to be like, wow, everyone else is getting a magic item, including the guy that just showed up, just got a magic item, and I didn't get anything. Like, that's not where I want my game to be going. So write down magic items. All of this is to say, again, the characters are the most important component of the games that we're running, and we should spend our time. I want to do a better job focusing my attention on the characters. Hopefully you got some tricks for doing that here. Hopefully there are ways that we can make it fun for us to kind of keep an eye on what the characters are doing, what they've picked up, what they specialized in. No real special note-taking techniques here. Just write it down. Write down the name of the character. Write down the stuff that they've got, and review it at the beginning of every one of your prep sessions. Write down information about the characters, write down stuff about their mechanics, write stuff about their characters, backgrounds and stuff like that, write about their story, write down secrets and clues, write about their magic items. Keep that in front of you. Take a look at it every time that you're going to prep your game, and I think you and your players are going to have a lot more fun at your table.